Welcome to the Honest Psychologist podcast, where two licensed clinical psychologists have joined the chat. I'm Dr. Whitney Graff.
I'm Dr. Paige Hover. We bring our years of expertise to the conversations you're already having, breaking down the topics shaping culture, social media, and everyday life.
No psychobabble, just relatable discussions about how our minds work and why it matters. Hey Paige, how's it going?
It's good. How about you?
Doing okay. We always record on Monday mornings.
Yeah, I feel like my appearance matches my Monday morning. Generally put together, I'm wearing shorts because it's the first warm day in a while. So that's a win.
Oh my God, your legs are just like out and about.
I know,
like,
my gams
hey,
are out.
how's it going? Do you like Monday mornings now?
Well, Mondays are always my day off. So it's like as long as I get to sleep in without having to have an alarm set, then like I don't dislike Mondays because it's always been like my day to do my own stuff. So like it helps me ease into the week and it helps Sunday feel way more relaxing because it's like I don't have anything I have to do tomorrow. Like I run my errands, I do my stuff, and now I record a podcast.
I know you've always had like a shifted weekend, like Sunday, Monday.
Yep,
Yeah.
for
See,
sure.
I usually, right now, I love Mondays because I have a small child. And so weekends are just so much.
So it's like
Just,
your day for you.
well, yeah, I underschedule Mondays in part because like the house is trashed. And when like I could either stay up till midnight on Sunday night, trying to put it all back together again from the very active weekend we just had. And also, it's like I finally get to complete a thought in my mind without a 4-year-old going, Mama, Mama, Mama. Oh my gosh. Like my brain is so fried, which I actually think takes us really nicely into our question for today.
Yes.
Yes,
Which
because,
is,
well, our question is, um, when it's not ADHD, what is it? Can we
yeah.
say that better? What is a better way to say that?
What else could it be other than ADHD or when it, but I think
What else?
actually that's a good way to put it because a lot of our past experiences testing people when they had the question of do they have ADHD is, I mean, more often than not, we were identifying what it was other than that. You know, people would come to us saying, like, hey, I'm noticing these symptoms, or I saw this TikTok, or I saw my friend got diagnosed with this and they do this. That we were really just taking those symptoms and naming them more directly for what they were rather than this kind of umbrella of ADHD that's become more popular as of late.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just in terms of what they call a base rate, which is kind of how often something occurs in a population. So, how many people, like in a representative group of 100 people in America, if you actually took 100 people that represent all the different types of people in America, maybe five out of those 100, as many as 10, but more closer to five of the, we're talking about adults right now, would meet full criteria for ADHD.
Which is
But
so in contrast to like a scroll on my For You page where I can't get five people in without the self-diagnosis of, well, it's my ADHD, or, oh, as an ADHD gardener, writer, I mean, name it. And it's like that it's not 75% of the population. It's just not.
well, if it was, we wouldn't call it anything. We wouldn't call it a disorder because it wouldn't be divergent from normal.
Right.
If it's something that most people do, or even a lot of people do, like, you know, 30% of people do something, we don't really call that a disorder because that's still a big, huge chunk of those 100 people in that group. We're talking about this representative. Imagine like you pulled 100 people, you put them in a conference room and they represent, American adults, if 30 of them all do something like procrastinate or feel anxious meeting new people, have social anxiety, then we don't really call that a psychological disorder. We say, that's something that humans do. We call it a human experience, not a
Right.
mental disorder.
Right.
So we
Yeah,
do spend a lot of time, I think we can definitely understand where our referred testing patients are coming from, right?
of course. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the point of coming to testing is, hey, I think I have this. What's going on? And is it something that is a disorder? Is it part of what everyday life looks like today? And part of our job was to try to make sure they understood that, but also with the twofold of making sure it was compassionately delivered. We understand that this is hard and frustrating to navigate life in this way. And also with education of like, hey, here's actually what it is. Taking all of these symptoms, it's not this, it's actually representative of this. And sometimes it was another disorder. Sometimes it was what everyday life kind of starts to look like now, and taking that into account. So,
Yeah.
kind of the heavy hitters we want to cover today is helping our listeners to understand how the following will show up and maybe look like ADHD and kind of explaining a little bit about why it's not. So, we're going to talk about anxiety, we're going to talk about depression, we're going to talk about burnout and kind of the overload. I think you had some other areas you wanted to cover.
Yeah, so like, yeah, overload, overburden, phase of life, stressors, that comes up. Perimenopause is huge. So I definitely want to make sure we talk about that when we're
Yeah.
asking if it's not ADHD, what is it?
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes it's normal executive dysfunction. Have we missed anything?
I think we'll cover other things
Those
as
are the
we go. I
big
mean, I think it's
ones.
also important to note that I haven't tabulated it yet, but I think as far as like disorders go, I think problems with concentration, which is what most people I think associate with ADHD, is a symptom of so many other disorders in that book, but also just other experiences that can happen. It doesn't mean that if you have trouble concentrating, this is the only answer. So I'm sure we'll stumble upon something else, but that's such a common experience. So why don't we start with anxiety? Well, I want to say like start with anxiety, but I think it lives so closely to depression in the sense of I see them as like two different ends of the spectrum, right? Like when we're looking at anxiety, I'm looking at it as more of an overload on speed, kind of your worries never stop. It's like a never ending, it's like extra oomph versus depression is the lack of oomph. And so
Mm.
when you're trying to concentrate, when you're, for example, like if you can imagine being really, really tired or really sad, like there's just, it's more of the opposite end where there's less to give. And so it's like generating energy to try to concentrate. Both is going to be interrupted in different ways.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's worth saying that a lot of people, when they feel depressed, will also have anxiety symptoms at the same time. And I think it can really run quite the gamut. Like, it can look like, in fact, if you actually look at the DSM, the number of ways to meet criteria for a depression disorder, there's like thousands of ways.
Mhm.
You could have no energy, no appetite, um, no interest in anything, and fatigue. And we could call that a depressive disorder. Maybe I should add one more on there. And like you are thinking a lot about death, but then you
Mhm.
could switch it all around. You could have um, like a sad mood, but lots of worries, plus lots of worries about your self-worth and your self-esteem, plus trouble keeping your mind on anything. You're kind of bouncing around with your focus. And those two things can both be called depression.
Mhm.
But those two people, if they talk to each other, wouldn't really have that much in common.
Hmm.
One of them is maybe a little bit more activated and the other one is sort of deactivated. But those things I mentioned are all symptoms of depression. And we
Hmm.
even diagnose depression with anxious distress.
Right. Yeah.
So you can have depressed symptoms and anxious symptoms, and we can cram them all into one label.
Hmm. Yeah. And how I think that can translate into like your everyday life, that is going to make it so that you walk into a room and you forget what you were doing and maybe do that repeatedly. Or at work, you have this task. It seems simple, and why can't I get that done? It can be, I mean, something like I've been looking at that pile of laundry for so long. Maybe you don't have the energy to do it, but maybe you also are just getting anxious by the amount of piling laundry that's coming up. And
Ooh.
those things I think are examples often associated with ADHD. And I don't know if we want to go down this kind of soapbox, but I think also too that there's a piece of ADHD that I think feels easier for people to say, like, hey, this is the thing that's going on. I think it's ADHD. Something about ADHD feels easier to swallow than saying, like, I'm depressed or I'm anxious. And I think it kind of goes two different ways. It's sometimes maybe it's hard personally to swallow, but also just the reaction that sometimes people will get where if you're going to somebody saying, hey, I'm having trouble with this kind of executive functioning or this task, is it do you feel more comfortable saying to somebody it's because I'm anxious versus hey, I have ADHD?
That's curious. I wonder, as we're kind of talking it out, there is a lot of stuff out there for ADHD. Like I was walking through the airport and I passed one of those airport bookshops, and right out in front of me in like like sidewalky kind of area,
Yeah.
like they had pushed out a display and it had like journals for ADHD. And I was like, oh, they're trying to sell me a journal for my ADHD that I don't have. And so this journal is only geared towards a tiny population, but it can feel, I think, a little bit like, oh yeah, almost like, I don't know, almost like everybody's going, oh yeah, ADHD, you have that, I have that. And okay, great. Whereas
Mhm.
to say, I'm going through a period in my life where I feel depressed. Ooh, I don't know. It maybe sort of
Vulnerable.
implies like that's a problem you got to solve, or like something is wrong.
Hmm.
Even as I say those words, I'm like, oh, it's not fun.
Hmm.
I don't like to admit that to myself.
Yeah.
I have a problem because I'm really down right now.
Yeah.
I'm going
My
through.
theory also too is that ADHD seems more packaged, right? Like it's this thing that I have ADHD, so then I go to my work HR, I ask for accommodations such as I need extra time to complete this task, or same in school. Same idea of there's really only what I think three or four medications at this time to treat ADHD. It's kind of
Well, it might be more than that.
might be more than
Where are
that, but
you
I think the
going with
heavy
that, though?
hitters are like your Ritalin, your Vyvanse, kind of do you need short term, do you need long term, kind of stuff like that. I'm distilling that down, but I think when you think about, well, maybe I need some medication for depression. I mean, that is a lot of people have kind of feelings about that because it takes trial and error. It's a vast array of options to treat that. I think there's something about maybe depression and anxiety that feels much vaguer and much harder to wrap your head around a solution versus I have ADHD,
Hmm.
here's the solution, it's clear cut. So
Maybe.
the double, not the double-edged sword, but the combination, I think, of abstract and the vulnerability that comes with maybe acknowledging what is the source of the executive function that you're noticing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right that like I mean, there's a ton of people in America who take SSRIs, which are like your Prozac, um, your Lexapro, et cetera. But even built into that, if you're going to take an SSRI for something like, depression, you have to take it for a month or maybe more. in before they even see if you're responding to it. Tons of people take them and maybe some part of their experience feels better, but then they come with side effects like sexual side effects. Um, sometimes other kind of annoying side effects, or,
It's just
they
simply
feel,
not feeling like yourself. I hear that a lot of just like,
oh, that's
oh, I didn't feel like myself. And some of that is the point, right? Like, we don't, if this is what you feel like all the time, we don't want you to feel like yourself. But I think there's that, it's jarring of just like, I feel weird. I don't feel like myself. I feel subdued. I hear a lot.
and people feel numb on
Hmm.
antidepressants. So in that way, if they're saying like the numbness is the opposite of myself, like I've lost my personal like vitality, like the essence of me, because I just feel so, like you
Yeah.
said, subdued or numb or blah, then that doesn't really feel like a successful outcome. So I could definitely see why. Yeah, I mean, the SSRIs are kind of fraught in that way. So sometimes they're really necessary, but I could see why they wouldn't necessarily feel, you know, like that's super helpful. Okay, well, you're going to take this, you're going to wait 4 to 6 weeks, and then you might feel worse. It might not do anything. You might feel better, or you might not, or we might have to try 10 other things. And that, whereas your stimulant medications are pretty, I think, pretty quick acting, and stimulants, sort of by definition, will make anybody feel more focused. That's,
I
and
think that's an
more activated. Yeah, that's what a stimulant does. So
right.
that is not a way to tell if you truly have ADHD or not, as I took a stimulant and it made me more focused. That is a myth.
Yeah.
Everybody focuses better on a stimulant. So that really has nothing to do with like what's underlying.
Preach, preach. Yes. Because I think a lot of it too, the history around psych meds was kind of, we realized that certain things worked for mental health conditions by accident, where it's like, oh, hey, like we didn't intend for this, but we're noticing that this happened. So there is a bit of that cause and effect history with psychotropic medications, but for a stimulant, especially stimulants with such a short half-life, like you have to take those every day, it burns itself out versus other ones that have to build up in your system, that you can't use that same logic with a stimulant. I mean, gosh, if we then go into overload, right? Like we're overloaded. My specialty is burnout for a reason because people are burned out. We're always taking on more than we really are physically capable of completing most times because of a number of things. But then take this stimulant that helps you focus and helps you get all those things done. You feel like a rock star versus feeling like you're behind or things like that. I think there's a lot of times when people see the understandable byproduct of being overloaded as a sign of ADHD. I think they see that as like, hey, that's that sign. But I think it's more so, what if we just said, like, you're overloaded? Nobody's going to be able to get that much stuff done anyway.
And I mean, I blame the content creator economy of
Mhm.
like we always need to be coming up with more content. You know, ADHD became a niche. And so it was like, let's find more and more things that we're gonna say are like a sign of ADHD. Because I'll never forget this friend of a friend that I was talking to who said, I told her what I do for a living, and like one of the things I do is assessment for psychological diagnoses, including like ADHD. And she goes, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't have ADHD, but the more content I see about this, like it's coming at me all the time. It's actually starting to make me question, do I have this?" And so all of that to say, I think when people are overloaded, like what you're saying, when life is like modern life is just so complicated, and you know, our kids are in activities, we're we're balancing a million responsibilities. I can't even just, go. I was trying to buy sneakers and it turned into this entire project of like reading reviews of sneakers and running shoes and all this stuff, and it became so complicated that I can understand how the brain fatigue that comes with all of that
Mhm.
if something's always saying, do you have brain fatigue? It could be this thing. Do you always feel forgetful? It could be ADHD. Do you feel, easily distracted? I mean, I just spent an entire weekend being constantly distracted and it feels like my brain is broken.
Hmm.
I cannot remember a damn thing right now. But
Well,
I'm just lucky that, I know a lot about this topic, and so I'm not as susceptible to the constant barrage of, do you feel brain fatigued? It could be ADHD.
hmm yeah. I mean, it feels like a little bit of a tinfoil hat conspiracy, but like, I've said before that I kind of feel like isn't it kind of convenient that the things that are that we are spending so much time on and that we notice our short, like attention spans is
Like
shorter because of
Instagram? Yeah.
that they're the ones telling us, oh, it's not us. It's not our app. It's not our technology. It's this you have ADHD. And so you just didn't know that, right? Like, don't look over
I
here. It's a you thing.
maybe. I mean, so in your conspiracy, you imagine that Instagram is like helping the ADHD content creators because it serves their ultimate
Oh,
goal.
I
I
didn't
thought
think
that's where
about
you were
that.
going.
No, I more so think that it's like, just the idea of screen time and how, we know that the more screen time we have, the shorter our attention spans are. And, since we've
Yeah.
been having more technology, that it's like, oh, it's not our app, but like it is, right? Like I can't pay attention to a reel for more than 10 seconds these days versus like when it first came out, I could sit down and watch that stuff, but you get more and more used to it. And then all this other stuff kind of starts to, my attention span just gets shorter. And
Oh
so
yeah.
my thought is like nobody wants to turn and look at the apps as the problem, which
Um,
kind of is. And it's like, oh no, 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 no. It's not
oh,
us.
I
But look at
see.
this other thing. It's because you've had ADHD this whole time. Like, because there's all those
Oh,
studies about social media and how it contributes to anxiety, depression, loneliness, all this other stuff, shorter attention spans that, we don't know all the research 100% behind that yet. So, but over time, we're seeing like, hey, this could be a problem. Maybe we should hold back on some of the apps or technology. And it's like, no, no, we need engagement. We need you to stay focused on this. So it's not us. Look over there. Look over there. It's not us.
yeah, I liked Johann Hari's book Stolen Focus for kind
Oh
of
yeah.
kind of like an examination of the ways that um our engagement with technology changes our attention span and our ability to focus, which I think is something we all kind of acknowledge, but I don't know. Speaking for myself, it's a little bit like because I know technology or like some of the apps where you scroll has been compared to smoking. So I
Is it
feel,
really? I'm
I
not shocked, but
guess, or like
okay.
the industry has been compared to like the tobacco industry. We're like, okay, we know there's a problem, but we're not going to regulate ourselves because this is our business to sell this to people.
Yeah.
So even like with my kid, I'm like definitely not getting her a phone. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting here on a phone, and I'm scrolling. And so I have this, I think the term is cognitive dissonance, where like my behavior is mismatched from my belief or my value. So I'm doing something even though I would freely admit that it's like bad for me or that I don't believe in it or something. And yet here I am sitting there. And um, you either like, what is it? You either rationalize your behavior or you change your belief to match your
Oh,
behavior.
yeah.
Yeah, because people don't like sitting in this state of I'm doing something that I wouldn't otherwise believe in. And so when I catch myself like scrolling on my phone next to my kid, who I'm going to try to tell I'm not getting you a phone, it's a real cognitive dissonance. So
Yes.
I'm working on it right now. I'm trying to have like an actual physical book on the couch,
Hmm.
so that when it's like, you go play and I'll sit here, I'm not going to sit and scroll. I'm trying. I still scroll.
Yeah.
But
It's
that's
funny. I've also started doing that at night, like making sure that if I'm going to go to bed, I'm not scrolling and then going to bed, I'm reading and going to bed. So naturally I've gotten more into like book talk on Instagram.
oh
And
no.
but there are
No.
literally times where it'll be like, "Hey, I have this awesome book I want you to read." Actually, I don't. Put your phone down and go read the book.
Wait,
Or
is that
like,
a real
oh my
thing?
God, this is this theory on this book. No, it's not. Go read your book. You said you like the
Really?
reminders of like you got in bed to read your book. Go read your book. And it's like, all right. But I do notice a significant difference in what my sleep quality is like when I'm not scroll. And I wouldn't say I'm always doom scrolling. Like my Instagram is mostly cats and private chefs and mid-sized fashion and all sorts of stuff. So it's like lighthearted stuff, but it's just constant stuff coming at me, versus like the
Mm-hmm.
slowing down of reading. And this is just my personal preference of like reading a physical book rather than a Kindle. That's just I find it feels more like I'm not turning on a device. So there is a noticeable difference where I just feel more anxious or it's harder to fall asleep. And so I do try to change that habit, but I think it is hard. It's hard to not do so. It's just folded into our everyday at this point.
Okay, well, that wasn't even on our list, but the influence of technology.
Yeah.
We did like over overload, which can be about like everything that you've taken on. I think it can also just kind of happen,
I
you
think it
know.
happens from keeping up with everybody else. Like my last point I'll say about that is that, like, if I look back at what I was doing as a kid in high school, and that was considered a lot, and that was considered like competitive for getting into college and all that other stuff, it doesn't hold a candle to what kids have to do these days to get in college and be competitive. Like taking AP courses as early as eighth grade, which for us, that wasn't even offered until high school, like there's just a lot that I think it's so easy to have to look to your left and look to your right and then see everybody else doing more than you and then you feeling like you have to keep up.
Yeah, I think it's some of that. Hmm. Yeah, I know. When I was in high school, we didn't even have APs until 10, no, 11th grade. It was a junior year thing. Like
Hmm.
junior year, you started either selecting into them or depending on your interests. And I remember being asked like, which APs, why don't you pick a couple, and I
Right.
was stronger like in English. So I don't definitely take AP junior English, whatever that was. And like I liked history a lot, but
Hmm.
I remember having the option to take AP chemistry and opting out. I took regular, like, I don't remember what 11th grade science was, but I took the regular one. I don't think I would have fared well in AP chemistry. I'm glad I didn't have to, have this intense challenge that I probably wasn't ready to
Hmm.
meet.
Yeah, and then I think
Um,
it translates into adulthood, right? Like you can look at, I mean, this person, is going to this yoga class and then they're cleaning their apartment and then they're doing their laundry and then they're meeting friends for this and then they have this project at work. Like it's so easy, I think, to feel overwhelmed and then, compare yourself to others and feel like you can't slow down or can't take more off your plate because why is everybody else seemingly doing so easily? And truthfully, they're not, but
yeah, I think
that's that
not.
they're not. But what they portray or what you see maybe on social media or when you hear like, hey, how was your weekend? You hear all these things like we're not leading with all the challenges that we have with that. And that's, I think, another way in which the ADHD thing kind of sneaks in. It's like, well, why am I seeing nobody else struggle with this? It's like people don't really wear their struggles the same way they do their successes. So a lot of people are struggling with that. And I think that that's where that question of do I have ADHD comes up because it's like, well, if they're not struggling and I am, do I have something wrong?
I agree. I personally, I don't know. I'm having mixed feelings about this, like as a parent.
Sure.
My husband and I talk about it like where we're trying to define what our I don't like what our strategy is for the long-term parenting of our kid. And, it's sort of nice when you have a baby to set out and say, I don't care about grades. I want her to be I want her to be a nice person with a generally satisfying life. And I don't need her to, like, I'll love her even if she's not a lawyer. It's so easy when you're just looking at this little baby, and you set out with these like lovely intentions to, not put any pressure on them. And then I don't know what's happening, but right now what we're facing, she's only 4, but for example, she's in swimming right now. And that's the choice we're making. She's having fun with it. I need her to learn how to swim.
Sure.
So we go to swim class every weekend. But she loves soccer. She's actually decent at it for a 4-year-old. I'm like, oh, okay, look at you go. So I'm like, oh, should I sign her up for soccer? Guess what? She also really loves music. So we find her like she wants to learn to play guitar. She likes to like put on little concerts for us. And I'm like, oh, do you think she would like to go to the music school down the road and like, I don't know, just take a little, music class or something? And all of these are just following her natural interests. And I have her in mind where I'm like, oh, she would love that. And I don't expect her to be a concert violinist or concert guitarist, but
Right.
I just want to follow her interests. And so then I go online and I start looking it up and I'm like, okay, so we could do swim at 1:30 and then that would be done by 2 and we would have enough time to change clothes. We could make it over to soccer at this time. And I notice how easily we slip into a weekend that is full of activities.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm like, this like crazed, like pusher mom
Right.
who is like trying to get my kid into, Juilliard or something extreme. It's just that I'm trying to like I just try to meet her interests, but then what I find is that if I just naturally followed that, we would end up at a lot of stuff and
Hmm.
we would lose time for free play. Well, guess what? I also follow accounts that teach me, Instagram accounts that tell me how important it is for her to have free play time. Okay, so now we have to have plenty of open, imaginative free play. And all of this is because I'm trying to be the best parent.
Yeah.
And
And
so
I would say that's what I hear from most of my friends who are parents, that this is that weekend, the intention behind it is the same. And it's like, that's just what it looks like, where it could be going from this activity to this activity to this activity. So I think that makes sense. It's like when you then compare yourself, you're not necessarily trying to do it for a competitive edge or because there's like perfection in mind. It's just the norm of everybody is busy, like
and it's available.
it is available.
And I feel if I'm not signing her up, maybe I'm depriving her of something that she would really enjoy or something that would kind of like, enhance her learning or make her, give her more challenge. It all comes from like a really well-intentioned, actually really pure place.
Hmm.
And it's only because I, I'm a psychologist, so I know about this stuff and I think about it that I pump the brakes on soccer class and music class. And even then, I have mixed feelings
Of course.
about
Yeah.
it. So I can really see how parents end up very, very busy, very scheduled, and very tired, forgetful, distracted, drinking a
Yeah.
lot of coffee. I get it.
Yeah. And then there's all of those things that are readily available that are saying those signs are signs of ADHD. And it's not that it's not true, but you have to go a little deeper in that. And I think it's worth saying, a lot of the stuff we've talked about so far is the opposite of developmental, right? We see these things kind of happen episodically or situationally that you're noticing suddenly you're struggling with that. And that's the antithesis of ADHD. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder that you would see these challenges happening early on and consistently, not at a certain period of time. And so I think that it's hard. That's where it's easy to capture the attention of like, hey, these are symptoms of ADHD. And then it goes, well, have you had that before the age of 12? And it's like, no, I was great. I could juggle all of this. And it's like, that's kind of a hallmark for us as providers to say, it's got to be something else, but that's not always talked about, of the lifelong neurodevelopmental aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And memory is really fallible too.
Mhm.
So when we do assessments, we try to get some kind of evidence that's beyond just a person's own memory, just because that's something we just know about how memory works. Is it's like really hard to know what you were like when you were 10, and all of your memories from 10 years old are through the lens of a 10-year-old. So you don't know necessarily how an adult perceived you because you were perceiving yourself and you were 10.
And
So
often oh, I'm so sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No.
No, and often I think when people look back now, they're looking back not saying, oh, how did I thrive? They're in the mindset of, well, I'm struggling now. Was I always struggling? Well, if you look at it, that was actually really hard. And it's like, yeah, there are going to be a lot of things developmentally speaking that are going to be challenging, but is it something that is hindering you in a lot of ways? Or is it fitting kind of the criteria of a disorder, which is just disrupting your daily functioning? Like it kind of becomes this lens then of looking back at it through the I've always had ADHD, I've always struggled kind of lens when maybe that wasn't the case.
Yeah. And speaking of like, things sort of starting up at some point in adulthood, I am seeing I'm seeing a lot of suggestion of ADHD in women over the age of 40. It's really hard in our job because, to assess somebody, the further we get from childhood, the further we get from the records that would show how your behavior was when you were a kid and whether or not it was like truly different from your peers.
Yep.
When we're talking about ADHD, we're talking about, childhood onset where behavior is notably different from the other kids that age. Like it
Hmm.
should be a real departure. And so then, when somebody's 40 something years old, 50 something years old, and I'm trying to assess, I can't rely just on that person's memory of themselves. I can't necessarily rely on a parent's memory of themselves because parents are also aging. I can't necessarily rely on the records. And especially in women, I think this might be getting a little bit more play now, but perimenopause, which includes like sort of the premenopausal years, like you might not hit actual menopause until 50, 51, whatever, but you're going to be starting to like basically getting on the on ramp to menopause for years leading up to that.
Yeah.
And menopause is a major biological change that has cognitive, like meaning thinking implications.
Yep. Yeah, I've been
Mood.
seeing more of it come out. Go ahead,
What
mood.
have you been seeing?
Just the title, like the name, the symptoms. Of course, it's my For You page is probably like, hey, she's anxious. Just so you know, this can start at 37. So I'm of course being like, oh my God, do I need to prepare for this? Like, I'm 38. Am I already in it? What's happening?
I think 37 would be, I mean, that would be on the really early end of perimenopause. Like that would be pretty rare, I think.
I hope so.
But everybody, I mean, I'm glad that more people are talking about menopause because I think it used to be kind of like this, like we're not allowed to talk about that. It's the
I mean,
change.
I couldn't tell you like what I'm supposed to be experiencing in menopause other than hot flashes. Like,
Yeah, that's like
that's
the
my
one
basic
thing.
knowledge.
Oh, and mood changes. Like everybody turns super cranky. But if we know that it affects mood, we also know it's affecting thinking
Yep.
and like new sort of distractibility, forgetfulness, things like that can be part of, this major transition in terms of your biology. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I was glad to see an article come out about this recently from a treatment center. I'm glad to see maybe some more attention being paid to it. But if you're 50 and you're a woman, you're probably going through menopause. So,
And if it's the first time you're questioning it, like I think that's an important
yes.
distinction for people to ask themselves is when is the first time I started questioning if I had ADHD? If it's the first time is happening at 50, it's probably not ADHD because this is a lifelong thing. So you want to look at situational things, you want to look at hormone changes, you want to look, I mean, gosh, we that's part of too the assessment of ADHD is taking a look at not just the reports of struggling to concentrate, looking at all of these factors like your current age, any health complications, any of this stuff that could be um, explaining any of your current symptoms is always important to take stock in that. So I think today we don't want to minimize the experiences, but I think it's just arming people with more knowledge of, hey, what's going on in my life right now that's making me question this to kind of help answer that question. Obviously, if you want the answer to be fully flushed out, you can come to a psychologist and have that examined, but some of these things I think are helpful to think about to just answer that question of, wait, do I, or is this one of these other possible things that it could be?
Yeah, exactly. Because that is ADHD is like a lot of disorders in the DSM where if you can explain it if you can explain the symptoms in some other way, you don't usually make the diagnosis.
Correct.
So a lot of disorders have an exception for like if it's explained by another diagnosis, then you don't add a second one on because that helps us not end up with like nine diagnoses all stacked up on top of each other.
Yeah,
If you can oh, go ahead.
you're not going to diagnose insomnia when you already have PTSD.
That's right. Yeah, because insomnia is a symptom of PTSD. And actually, while we're mentioning that, problems with concentration is a symptom of PTSD also.
For sure.
We should do
For
another episode on trauma.
Yeah, that's that's another episode. But yeah, I mean, I think if you think about just like anything, we've talked about depression, we've talked about anxiety, we've talked about life circumstances, we've talked about mood or hormone changes, but I think there's a lot of ways, you could go back like we started there. You might find that any number of things could also be contributing to that because when something else is going on or there's something else in the room when you're trying to do something that requires executive functioning, it can get messy or it can get slow or it can get inefficient. And it's just taking stock of all the players in the room, really.
Yeah, it's exactly it. Executive functioning fluctuates. If you give me bad news, my executive functioning will suck for the next, I don't know, hour, day.
Yeah, for
If I'm trying to make sense of like, I just got bad news and it wasn't what I was expecting, suddenly I'm disorganized and I can't make a plan. I can't stick to the plan. I've already forgotten the plan. Like, executive functioning is more like weather than
Yeah,
climate.
yeah, for sure.
It can start
Or
raining, it can stop raining.
yeah, or it seems like you're zoning out or you're not paying attention, like all that stuff for sure. I think it was you though who was telling me that I can't remember if it was an article or something that you'd read, but kind of the idea that as your executive functioning over your lifetime, like especially as it's developing, you're meant to struggle. Like you're meant to approach a situation, not do it effectively, and learn from that to develop good executive functioning. And I think that there's a high expectation for achievement and success, especially in our culture and society, that when that's a normal, natural part of learning, it can often be equated with a problem rather than, yeah, that's part of the process. It sucks, and it's part of the process.
Yeah. I mean, this is just something I think about with kids going through school is like a teacher assigns homework. Okay, go do these math problems. When you think about the math problems, you're thinking, okay, they need to be learning this math skill. But I think what we forget is that the teacher is also telling them, take this worksheet, bring it home, bring it back tomorrow. And that just the act of like staying organized, developing routine, that is part of the learning also. Just
Mhm.
the act of keeping track of a worksheet or whatever it is, like that's actually training up executive functioning too. And that kids aren't supposed to just automatically like know how to do all that stuff. Everything that they encounter in their environment, the parents, the teachers, the different things they participate in, whatever they're interacting with is teaching them executive functioning.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think, oh, can I tell you my idea? I
Yeah.
think AA teaches executive functioning.
Oh, say more.
I know, right? This like popped into my head. I was working with a client who had a like alcohol use disorder, alcoholism. And he was going to AA and he was just commenting on how different it felt. Like, I have to show up at this place at this time, and then they asked us to think about this thing. And then I'm going to show up next week. And, I've got the book. And I was like, oh, wow. When I was comparing it to just how he was living when he was still in the alcohol disorder. And I was like, oh, yeah, your life was really chaotic back then.
Hmm.
And a lot of people can develop addiction early and it can go on for years and years and years. And so that chaos can kind of be, long term and pervasive. And so then to come out of that and achieve sobriety, you have to get more order to your
Yes.
life.
Yeah.
And I think AA kind of serves some of that function.
Yeah. Speaking of like, oh, we should do a whole episode, the impact of substance use and
Oh my
how
God,
that,
we
like,
need to talk
I mean,
about
the
that.
amount of times I would get referrals of, hey, there's somebody in this substance abuse program. I think they have ADHD. I, I mean, no, I'm not going to assess that until they're sober, until they have had some practice with that, like till they've had, like, you got to wait a little bit to see what life looks like for them in long-term sobriety and then assess that ADHD, like, because it looks
Hmm.
totally different.
That's a tricky one though. Because here's the other thing that I'm thinking about as you're saying that is like, it is true that the people who do have ADHD, like the kids growing up into adolescence, growing up into adults who have ADHD, are much more likely to develop
Sure.
addiction,
Sure.
because of impulsivity and, not like maybe something to do with planning or strategy, delaying gratification.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I actually never made a formal statement about like substance use and people I would assess. Like I never established an exact, like you have to not use for this amount of time or you have to
Mm-hmm.
be fully sober for this amount of time. But
Mm-hmm.
that is a question that comes up all the time. And we have to come up with some sort of a workable answer.
Right.
Because you are exactly right. Like for us, people think there's some sort of magic test, like, oh, you'll just be like they'll just do their thing and we'll figure out if it's really ADHD or if it's really the drugs and alcohol. And it's like, I don't have like an X-ray machine.
No, no.
So,
And I think that the outcome is the same, right? Like the only thing that could possibly be introduced, kind of immediately is a stimulant. But if we're talking about somebody getting sober, we don't want to introduce a stimulant.
oh,
Like,
is that true? I
so
mean,
it's
it
like,
can depend on the person, I suppose, but like, oh boy, yeah.
right. So it's like, okay, well, let's work on executive functioning, even if that's the case. And then if you really want, if something feels like it's not sticking, or maybe you do feel like you need a stimulant and want to be aware of your history. So therefore you want to get the evaluation to say like, hey, I have this history, but I also think I need this medication. Like, okay, sure. But
Or a
it's like,
non-stimulant ADHD drug.
yeah,
And like
exactly.
monitoring, I think is kind of what you're saying, like closely monitored by a physician who understands. that
Yeah.
that's part of the problem is that
Yeah.
we're also working on sobriety. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole other episode too on just like, okay, well, if you get tested for ADHD, then what? Right? Like
Mm.
I think I on like before would have assumed that a lot of people wanted to get medication, but a lot of people I've encountered don't want medication, and it's always a head scratcher for me of like, okay, well, why do you want this diagnosis then? Like it's a genuine question, it's curiosity, and I think a lot of times that is a stumper for people too of, huh, why do I want this? And there's lots of reasons why, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, have we covered it?
I think we have. I think we've covered some of these things. We'll this is a common point of discussion, so we'll come back to it in different angles, but we wanted to tackle when it's not ADHD, what else could it be?
I think we
All
did
right.
it.
All right. Well, tune in next week for another topic.
Another
We don't quite know what that
exciting
topic
episode.
is.
Yeah, we don't know
Another
either.
exciting episode of the Honest Psychologist podcast.
All right.
All right.
Nice to see
Take
you,
care.
Paige.
Bye.
Bye. This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for treatment of any kind.